Architecture is a spatial practice. It really is about designing space and being involved with space. Sometimes that means designing a building, and sometimes that means not designing a building. In fact, you can have a spatial involvement, often without doing something particularly. But what is important is that we are always making propositions. It's not enough to simply respond to changes in society or changes in public opinion. We must take those and really make a clear proposition for how we think we should live and how we think our cities should be designed. It's really strange because in Britain at the moment, architecture is becoming more fashionable in a way. It's becoming more popular. It's taking up a place within mainstream cultural discourse. But the big challenges that face particularly young architects are that we enter into the profession with very high levels of debt. It's very expensive to go to university, and we're very badly paid. I think it's been many decades since we last really examined the structure of the firm, and we in a way inherit the corporate structures of previous generations. As a result, I think one of the things that's very exciting in Britain at the moment is that we're seeing many more types of firm arrive. In my case, my architectural firm is also a cultural institute, but we're seeing collectives, networks, different types of organizations in order to achieve new types of projects. I think Aravena's challenge, which was a very good one, was for the architect to be more socially minded and to be more humanitarian. I find the military metaphor problematic for many reasons, but in essence I also think that the problem that he's setting out may not necessarily be an architectural one. I think that first of all we must be engaged and active citizens, we must be involved in our society, and then we must use architecture to achieve that. I don't know whether or not architecture itself has the types of power that Aravena thinks, and I think there is also the risk that you set up conditions for disappointment, where the public thinks that architects can do things that they don't have the power. I think generally within Europe, what the Future Architecture platform has done for me is to allow me to meet many people who are very similar to me in very different circumstances and really understand lots of local conditions. Europe is in a very difficult position at the moment, and I would describe the global condition really as one of like a global civil war, where it's not an actual violent conflict like in Syria. We are still seeing huge amounts of political instability and economic instability, in which rather than in previous generations of being huge national blocs, it's really always a domestic problem. But what you see is that those domestic problems are the same all across Europe. They are high unemployment, poor access to housing, and what we are creating is an entire generation of architects who don't have the possibility to build and who are therefore looking for alternative ways to realize their vision. Of course, the opinion that I think the British have of the Balkan region is that it sits slightly at the fringe of this, because you have at the moment, it feels like a lot of optimism about the future and a lot of new projects which are being done. And most of all, what I really admire particularly about Albania is a commitment to young architects. I have a number of colleagues who are doing projects in Albania, and there is not so much of a discrimination against young people, or at least that's the perception that we have. I think the thing to remember about globalization is that it is not the creation of another state. It is really the universal application of local conditions. And the more we understand about the specifics of particular locations, the better equipped we are to act in our own society. So for me, it's been very important to travel around Europe and to see how in specific local conditions, how architects are addressing problems which are in fact across the entire area. I really believe that in order to change the way that we make cities, we have to change the way in which we finance construction. The terms and conditions of the mortgage particularly, the way in which we get access to capital and debt, who is building, why are they building, and for whom, really needs to change. And I think at the moment, democracy in Europe is quite weak. It's not something that people like to discuss because it's such a fragile and sensitive subject. But increasingly, I think we have to look for ways at which small groups are able to affect large change. And this comes, for me, through uniting our efforts across many different contexts. The main challenge that I see is precisely this problem of an entire generation who are unable to put their training into action. We have an entire generation of people who are very socially motivated, very socially minded to improve their conditions, and they face huge barriers from financial, economic and political forces that prevent them from being involved in making their cities. And I think we have to look for new spaces of experimentation and new areas where we can begin to infiltrate into those established interests.